There are places on this planet that simply shouldn't exist. Ancient towers built thousands of years before civilization was supposed to begin. Massive stone structures hidden beneath jungles so dense the world forgot they were there. Symbols carved into rock that nobody has ever fully explained. These aren't myths, they're real places, studied by archaeologists, photographed by explorers, and still surrounded by mystery. And the deeper we go into these forgotten sites, the stranger the story becomes, because some civilizations vanished without warning, some monuments were built with impossible precision, and some ruins still remain hidden beneath the earth even today. Subscribe if you haven't already, leave a like to support the channel, and comment below what time it is where you're watching from tonight. Now get comfortable, relax, and let's descend into the forgotten mysteries of the ancient world together. The Forgotten Temple, hidden inside a canyon. Long before tourists filled the famous stone passages of Petra, another hidden sanctuary remained buried quietly beyond the cliffs, deeper inside the desert, hidden within narrow canyon walls where almost nobody travelled anymore. No giant crowds, no massive treasury facade, just silence, sandstone, and the feeling that something ancient had been left behind intentionally. The place became known as Sik al-Barid, the Cold Canyon, and honestly, the name fits perfectly, because the deeper you move into the canyon, the world suddenly feels colder, quieter, and strangely disconnected from time itself. Sik al-Barid lies not far from Petra in modern-day Jordan, carved into the same rose-coloured sandstone landscapes shaped by the Nabatean civilization more than 2,000 years ago. But unlike Petra's monumental central structures, this hidden complex remained isolated and far less explored for centuries. Many people now call it Little Petra, though the name feels misleading. Because the site does not feel smaller emotionally, it feels secret. The entrance itself changes everything immediately. A narrow sandstone corridor cuts through towering canyon walls so tightly in places that sunlight barely reaches the ground for parts of the day. Wind moves through the passage quietly. Footsteps echo unnaturally against the rock, and because the canyon blocks much of the outside landscape completely, visitors lose their sense of scale almost instantly. That matters psychologically. Ancient builders understood the emotional power of controlled space extremely well. The Nabateans were masters of desert trade and survival. They controlled important caravan routes carrying spices, incense, textiles, and luxury goods across harsh landscapes connecting Arabia, the Mediterranean, and beyond. Petra became wealthy through that network, but Sik al-Barid appears to have served a quieter purpose, part ceremonial space, part caravan station, part hidden retreat carved into the canyon itself. And honestly, the isolation may have been intentional from the beginning. As visitors move deeper into the canyon, carved chambers and facades slowly emerge from the sandstone walls almost without warning. Doorways cut directly into stone, rooms shaped from the cliffs, ancient dining halls and ceremonial spaces preserved beneath layers of erosion and silence. Unlike ordinary ruins assembled block by block, these structures feel fused into the canyon naturally. The mountain itself became architecture. One of the most fascinating discoveries at the site involved surviving fresco paintings hidden inside sections of the carved interiors. That detail shocked archaeologists because very little Nabatean painting survived elsewhere. The artwork contained delicate vines, birds, and decorative patterns preserved for centuries in the dry desert environment. And suddenly the ruins stopped feeling empty, because traces of colour reveal the place once looked dramatically different than the faded stone visible today. But what truly gives Sik al-Barid its atmosphere is the silence. Petra feels monumental. The cold canyon feels abandoned. The narrow walls absorb sound strangely while cutting off large sections of sky above. At certain moments, the canyon becomes so still that even small movements feel amplified unnaturally. And honestly, environments like this affect human perception immediately. Isolation changes emotion faster than people realize. There's another reason the site became mysterious historically. Many researchers believe Sik al-Barid may have hosted important ceremonial gatherings or elite caravan feasts connected to Nabatean trade culture. Large carved dining spaces suggest organized social or ritual activity took place deep inside the canyon. This was not just a random desert outpost. People intentionally gathered here beneath the cliffs away from the outside world. that separation likely mattered symbolically. The Nabateans themselves remain one of the most fascinating civilizations of the ancient world. Masters of water engineering in extreme desert conditions, they created hidden cistern systems, reservoirs, and channels allowing large populations to survive in environments most people considered nearly impossible. Without water control, Petra and its surrounding settlements could never have existed, and places like Sikh, Al-Barid reveal how deeply integrated architecture and landscape became within their civilization. Naturally, myths later attached themselves to the canyon, hidden treasure chambers, secret tunnels beneath the rock, lost ceremonial rites performed away from Petra's main city. Some stories claim the canyon once connected to deeper underground systems still undiscovered today. Most of these theories remain unsupported archaeologically. Still, the environment itself encourages imagination. Narrow passages always do. Humans instinctively associate enclosed corridors with hidden knowledge and secrecy. There's also something psychologically strange about ancient spaces carved directly into cliffs. Built cities feel temporary. Carved cities feel eternal. The structures appear less like construction and more like revelation, as though they were uncovered from inside the mountain instead of built onto it. Sikh al-Barid creates that exact feeling repeatedly. The canyon hides the architecture until the final moment, then suddenly the stone opens into carved chambers frozen inside the cliffs. And unlike many ancient ruins crowded constantly with tourism, parts of the cold canyon still preserve genuine quiet. You can stand beneath the sandstone walls and hear almost nothing except wind moving through the rock passages, exactly as it did thousands of years ago. That continuity feels unsettling in the best possible way. The environment still behaves ancient. There's another layer to the mystery too. The Nabatean world eventually declined after Roman expansion, absorbed the region, and trade routes shifted elsewhere. Over time, desert winds reclaimed sections of these canyon settlements, while memory faded gradually outside local knowledge. Places like Sikh al-Barid did not disappear dramatically. They became forgotten slowly, and honestly, slow forgetting always feels heavier than sudden destruction. Because somewhere inside the canyon, people once gathered beneath painted ceilings lit by firelight, while caravans rested outside among the desert cliffs. Voices echoed through chambers carved into the stone. Ceremonies happened here. Trade negotiations happened here. Life filled the canyon once, then the world moved on. The desert tombs carved into vertical walls. High above the cliffs of southern Turkey, entire tombs stare outward from the rock face itself, not built on the ground, not hidden underground. Carved directly into vertical canyon walls so high above the landscape that reaching them even today feels dangerous. And the first time travellers saw them emerging from the cliffs, many believed the dead had been placed closer to the sky on purpose. Because these were not ordinary graves, these were stone houses for the dead suspended above the earth itself. The Lycian rock tombs were created more than 2,000 years ago by the ancient Lycian civilization, a powerful culture that once occupied parts of what is now southwestern Turkey. The Lycians built cities, controlled trade routes, fought empires, and developed one of the most visually unusual burial traditions in the ancient world. Instead of burying elite figures beneath monuments or inside pyramids, they carved elaborate tomb chambers directly into steep cliff faces overlooking valleys and rivers. And honestly, the placement still feels impossible in certain locations. Some tombs sit dozens of meters above the ground, carved into nearly vertical rock walls. Massive stone facades imitate wooden houses and temple architecture with incredible detail. Doors, beams, columns, and decorative carvings all shape directly into the mountain itself. The craftsmanship alone is astonishing. Ancient workers stood suspended against dangerous cliffs, carving permanent homes into solid stone using tools far more primitive than modern machinery. And they did it repeatedly across entire landscapes. One of the most famous groups of tombs overlooks the ancient city of Myra, where enormous carved burial chambers dominate the cliffs above the ruins below. From a distance, the mountain almost looks inhabited. Rows of silent stone doorways watching the valley beneath them. The effect becomes especially haunting during sunrise or sunset, when shadows deepen across the carved entrances and the tombs begin looking less like ruins and more like windows. But what truly fascinates archaeologists is why the Lycians placed the tombs so high above the ground in the first place. One ancient belief suggests the dead were elevated close to the heavens or carried upward by winged spiritual beings after death. Whether literal or symbolic, height clearly mattered deeply within Lycian funerary culture. The dead were separated physically from ordinary life, placed into the cliffs where earth and sky almost touched. And honestly, ancient cliff burials affect people differently than underground tombs. Underground spaces feel hidden. Cliff tombs feel exposed, visible permanently against the landscape. The dead remain watching over the world below instead of disappearing beneath it. That emotional difference changes everything psychologically. The tombs themselves also reveal how strongly the Lycians valued identity and status after death. Some chambers were richly decorated internally, while monumental facades projected wealth and importance outward across the landscape. Death became architecture. Memory became visible permanently through stone. And because the cliffs preserved many structures remarkably well, the tombs still dominate the valleys even after thousands of years. There's another fascinating detail too. Many Lycian tombs imitate wooden architecture even though they were carved into stone. That suggests that designs copied real buildings now long vanish completely. Wood decays. Stone survives. So ironically, the tombs may preserve visual evidence of Lycian domestic architecture better than ordinary houses ever could. The dead preserved the appearance of the living world accidentally. The geography surrounding the tombs also intensifies their atmosphere enormously. Dry cliffs, river valleys, Mediterranean light striking pale stone walls. The environment already feels ancient before the tombs even appear. Then suddenly entire facades emerge from vertical mountainsides impossible to ignore once seen. And because many entrances remain inaccessible without climbing equipment today, the structures preserve an eerie sense of distance and untouchability. Naturally, myths expanded around the tombs for centuries. Hidden treasure chambers sealed behind stone walls, curses protecting elite burials, secret tunnels connecting cliff chambers deep inside the mountain. Some local stories even claimed the tombs glowed faintly during certain nights, or contained spirits watching the valleys below. Most of these legends emerged long after the Lycian civilization disappeared, but the architecture itself practically invites mythology automatically. There's also the issue of labour. Creating these tombs required extraordinary planning, scaffolding, climbing skill, and engineering organisation. Ancient workers suspended themselves against sheer rock faces, carving detailed chambers metre by metre into solid stone. That scale of effort reveals how important death rituals were within Lycian society. The tombs were not symbolic gestures. They were monumental investments of labour and identity meant to survive indefinitely. And in many ways they succeeded. Because long after the Lycian civilization disappeared into history through conquest, cultural change and Roman absorption, the tombs remained watching silently above the valleys. Empires changed beneath them. Religions changed beneath them, languages disappeared beneath them, but the carved stone facades survived. Archaeologists still debate aspects of Lycian spiritual belief because written evidence remains limited compared to larger ancient civilizations. That uncertainty gives the tombs even more mystery emotionally. We understand how they were built, we partially understand who built them, but parts of why remain hidden behind centuries of silence. And maybe that's why the cliff tombs affect people so strongly today. Because they create the sensation that the dead never fully left the landscape. The mountains themselves became cemeteries, entire cliffs transformed into cities of stone watching over the living world below. Even now, the tombs remain carved into the vertical walls of Turkey, exactly where ancient builders placed them thousands of years ago. Silent chambers suspended high above the valleys, ancient doorways leading nowhere visible. And across the cliffs of Lycia, the stone houses of the dead still stare outward toward the horizon, as though waiting for something to return. The forgotten ruins buried in Pakistan's mountains, thousands of years before modern civilization, an advanced city already existed in the ancient lands of Pakistan. Its streets were planned, its drainage systems worked with incredible precision, its buildings followed organized layouts long before most civilizations understood urban design at all. Then, one day, the city disappeared, buried beneath dust, silence, and time itself, until archaeologists uncovered the ruins again centuries later. The world would eventually know the place as Mohenjo-Daro. But beyond the famous ruins, smaller forgotten structures hidden across the surrounding landscape still continue raising unsettling questions about how advanced this civilization truly was. Mohenjo-Daro belonged to the Indus Valley civilization, one of the oldest urban societies ever discovered. Dating back more than 4,000 years, the city already contained remarkably sophisticated planning. Wide streets crossed through neighborhoods in organized grids, drainage channels carried water away from homes, public bathing areas and storage systems revealed careful engineering far ahead of what many historians once expected from that time period. And honestly, that's what shocked archaeologists most after excavation began. The city didn't feel primitive, it felt strangely modern. But unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, the civilization left behind very few obvious kings, giant monuments, or readable historical records explaining who ruled the city or how society fully worked. Instead, the ruins remained mostly silent. Brick walls, collapsed homes, underground drainage systems, fragments of a language that still hasn't been completely understood. That silence became part of the mystery itself. The lesser structures surrounding Mohenjo-Daro mattered enormously because they revealed ordinary daily life beyond the larger ceremonial areas. Smaller houses, workshops, storage chambers, narrow alleyways hidden between residential blocks. These ruins showed that this wasn't simply a ceremonial city built for rulers. Real communities lived here, families cooked here, people worked here, children grew up here thousands of years ago while the city functioned around them. And honestly, that normality makes the ruins feel more haunting. The streets still look usable. Certain building layouts still resemble recognizable neighborhoods. Some drainage systems would not feel completely out of place, even in later historical cities. The place feels interrupted rather than ancient, almost like life stopped suddenly and never fully returned. There's another reason the site became so important historically. Mohenjo-Daro proved the Indus Valley civilization was far more advanced than earlier generations realized. The city belonged to a massive network of settlements spread across huge parts of South Asia. Trade routes connected distant regions. Weights and measurements appeared standardized. Construction methods followed organized patterns across multiple cities. This was not isolated development. It was a large functioning civilization with coordination on an enormous scale. But over time, something changed. The cities declined. People left gradually, and eventually entire settlements disappeared beneath layers of earth and abandonment. Researchers still debate exactly why. Some believe environmental changes and shifting river systems damaged agriculture and trade. Others point toward flooding, migration, or slow societal collapse unfolding across generations. The truth may involve all of them together. Naturally, mystery theories later exaggerated everything: lost technology, ancient disasters, hidden advanced knowledge erased from history. Most of those ideas have little archaeological evidence behind them, but they spread because Mohenjo-Daro already feels emotionally ahead of its time. When ancient ruins appear unexpectedly sophisticated, people instinctively start searching for impossible explanations. The city's drainage system especially fascinated researchers. Water management existed throughout large sections of the settlement. Covered drains connected homes and streets carefully. Some houses even contained bathing areas and wells integrated into the architecture itself. That level of organization required planning, labor, and long-term civic coordination. Ancient people here clearly understood infrastructure extremely well, and yet despite all that sophistication, the civilization still vanished. That contradiction is what keeps the mystery alive emotionally, because modern people assume advanced societies should survive longer, but history repeatedly proves otherwise. Even organized civilizations can disappear slowly until only ruins remain. The surrounding landscapes of Pakistan deepen that feeling enormously. Dust-covered foundations stretch across dry terrain beneath harsh sunlight. Some smaller excavation areas remain partially buried, giving the impression that huge portions of the civilization still sleep underground untouched. And honestly, archaeologists believe much of the Indus Valley world probably does remain buried beneath the earth even today. There's also the issue of language. The Indus script survives on seals and artifacts, but historians still cannot fully decipher it with certainty. That means one of the oldest urban civilizations on Earth still cannot completely explain itself to us directly. The cities survive physically, but their voice remains partially locked away in silence. And maybe that's why Mohenjo-Daro continues haunting people today. Not because of impossible technology or hidden myths, but because the ruins feel so human. A functioning city once stood here. People believed their homes and streets would continue into the future. Then, over centuries, the civilization faded until the world forgot it existed entirely. The desert megastructure seen only from the sky. For thousands of years, nobody understood what these structures really were, not because they were buried underground, but because they were too massive to recognize from the ground. Then airplanes revealed the truth. Across the deserts of Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, enormous stone formations stretched across the landscape like giant symbols carved directly into the earth itself. The world would later call them desert kites, and honestly, even today they still don't look real from the sky. The structures are made from long stone walls extending across huge desert regions. Some stretch for kilometers through empty volcanic plains and rocky valleys. From above, many form giant funnel-like patterns ending in enclosed areas or cliffs. But from ground level, they barely look important at all, just low stone lines disappearing into the desert. That's what makes them so strange. The builders created something far too large for ordinary human perspective. Researchers believe the desert kites were ancient hunting systems built thousands of years ago. Animals would be guided through the narrowing walls into traps where hunters could capture entire herds more efficiently. Simple idea, massive scale. And that scale changed how archaeologists viewed prehistoric societies completely. Because these weren't random stone markers. Ancient people were engineering entire landscapes long before most famous civilizations even existed. Some desert kites date back over 7,000 years. That timeline matters enormously. The structures existed before many monumental temples and kingdoms people usually associate with large-scale construction. And unlike pyramids or palaces built for appearance, these megastructures served survival directly. The desert itself became a giant machine for controlling movement. The name desert kite came from pilots who first recognized the shapes from aircraft during the 20th century. From above, the formations resembled giant kites stretched across the ground. And once aerial photography improved, researchers realized there weren't just a few examples. There were thousands. Entire regions filled with geometric stone systems hidden in plain sight for centuries. Naturally, mystery theories followed immediately. Ancient alien markings, lost civilizations, secret symbols visible only from the sky. Because humans instinctively struggle with structures this large and organized, especially when they only fully make sense from above. But the real explanation may actually be more impressive. Ancient people coordinated massive construction projects across hostile deserts using nothing except planning, labor, and deep understanding of animal behavior. And honestly, the Saudi desert environment makes the formations feel even stranger. Empty plains stretch endlessly beneath harsh sunlight. Then aerial images suddenly reveal enormous geometric patterns hidden across the terrain. It feels almost impossible that people built these structures thousands of years ago without modern surveying technology. Yet they did, stone by stone, across entire landscapes. Researchers also believe some kite systems may have affected wildlife populations permanently through large-scale hunting over generations. If true, that means prehistoric humans were already reshaping ecosystems on a massive level far earlier than most people imagine. These were not primitive survival groups barely surviving in the desert. They were organized societies capable of altering the environment itself. There's also something psychologically unsettling about the structures. Most architecture is designed to be experienced directly. The desert kites only truly reveal themselves from the sky. That creates the strange feeling they were built for a perspective ancient humans supposedly never had. And honestly, that emotional contradiction is part of what keeps the mystery alive. Even today, new desert kites continue appearing through satellite imagery across remote areas of Saudi Arabia and neighboring regions. Some remain partially buried beneath rock and sand. Others stretch across landscapes so isolated that almost nobody ever sees them in person. And somewhere beneath the silence of the desert, enormous sections of this forgotten stone network may still remain undiscovered. The monoliths hidden in Nigeria's forests. Deep inside the forests of southern Nigeria, hundreds of ancient stone figures stand silently between trees and overgrown pathways. Some are taller than humans, others are covered in strange carved symbols no one fully understands. And for centuries the monoliths remained hidden beneath dense vegetation, while the outside world barely knew they existed at all. Even today, the forests around them still feel isolated enough that discovering the stones almost feels accidental. Like you've walked into the remains of a forgotten civilization that history somehow left behind. The Ikon monoliths are located in Cross River State, Nigeria, scattered across villages and forested regions far from many major archaeological sites people usually associate with ancient stone monuments. Researchers believe many of the stones are hundreds, possibly even thousands, of years old. But one of the biggest mysteries surrounding them is simple. Nobody knows exactly who carved all of them or why. The monoliths are carved from volcanic stone and shaped into standing human-like forms. Many contain faces, geometric markings, symbols and patterns etched directly into the surface. Some almost resemble ancient guardians standing motionless inside the forest. Others look more abstract, covered in symbols resembling an unknown writing system. And honestly, that's what makes the site so unsettling emotionally. The carvings feel intentional, but their full meaning has largely disappeared. Unlike famous monuments built beside giant cities or royal capitals, the Ikon stones exist quietly inside rural landscapes surrounded by trees, villages, and dense vegetation. That isolation changed how the monoliths survived historically. For long periods, they remained largely unknown internationally while local communities preserved stories and traditions connected to them. And because fewer outsiders studied them early on, much of their history stayed fragmented. Researchers believe the stones may have served ceremonial, spiritual, or ancestral purposes. Some could represent important individuals, territorial markers, or sacred symbols connected to older belief systems in the region. But without surviving written records explaining them clearly, interpretation becomes difficult. The stones remained physically present, while their original language and meaning faded over generations. And honestly, forests change archaeological sites psychologically. Ruins in deserts feel exposed. Ruins in forests feel hidden. Sound becomes softer. Visibility shrinks. Vegetation slowly surrounds everything until the monuments feel absorbed into the landscape itself. The Ikon monoliths carry exactly that atmosphere. They don't dominate the environment, they disappear into it. Some of the carved symbols also deepen the mystery significantly. Researchers noticed repeating patterns and markings across different stones, leading to speculation that the monoliths may preserve forms of symbolic communication or early writing traditions. Certain carvings resemble faces combined with abstract signs almost impossible to fully interpret today. That uncertainty keeps the site emotionally powerful, because humans react strongly to symbols they can no longer read. Naturally, mystery theories followed over time. Lost African civilization, forgotten kings, ancient spiritual guardians hidden inside the jungle. Some stories even claim the stones moved or changed positions over generations. Most of those legends emerged through oral storytelling long after the monuments were created. But honestly, standing stone figures hidden in forests almost automatically generate mythology. The environment itself feels ancient. There's another reason the monoliths matter historically. They challenge older assumptions about African archaeology completely. For years, many global histories focused heavily on Egypt, while overlooking the enormous diversity of ancient cultures and monumental traditions that existed across the rest of Africa. The Ikon stones prove complex symbolic and artistic traditions existed deep within West Africa, long before many outsiders realized sites like this even existed. The craftsmanship also varies between monoliths, suggesting different creators, time periods, or social groups may have contributed to the tradition over long stretches of time. Some carvings are detailed and expressive. Others are simpler and heavily weathered by rain and forest growth. That variation makes the site feel less like a single monument and more like an evolving sacred landscape shaped across generations. And because tropical climates destroy archaeological evidence quickly, the survival of the stones themselves feels remarkable. Wood disappears, textiles decay, entire settlements can vanish beneath vegetation, but the monoliths remained standing through centuries of rain, heat, and forest expansion. Silent markers outlasting the cultures that originally carved them. There's also something deeply human about the faces themselves. Even after erosion, many still feel expressive. Eyes, mouths, symbolic features emerging through weathered stone. The monoliths don't feel decorative alone. They feel watchful. And humans instinctively react strongly to human-like forms standing motionless in natural environments. Maybe that's why the site continues haunting visitors today. Not because the monoliths prove impossible mysteries, but because they preserve fragments of a world that never fully explained itself to modern history. The stones survived. The forests survived. But much of the civilization behind them faded into silence. Even now, the Ecom monoliths remain hidden among the forests of Nigeria, ancient carved figures standing quietly beneath the trees exactly where they were placed long ago, and somewhere between the stone faces and the forgotten symbols carved into them, part of their story may still be waiting to be understood again. The forgotten pyramid deep in Sudan. Far beyond the famous pyramids of Egypt, another royal necropolis rises from the desert in near silence. No massive crowds, no endless lines of tourists, just wind moving across ancient stone structures standing alone beneath the Sudanese sky. And hidden among them are the pyramids of Nuri, forgotten royal tombs built for kings and queens whose empire once rivaled Egypt itself. Most people have never even heard of them, and honestly that's part of what makes the place feel so strange, because these pyramids should be world famous. The pyramids of Nuri are located in northern Sudan near the Nile River, built by the ancient kingdom of Kush more than 2,000 years ago. The Kushite civilization controlled powerful trade routes across Africa, and at times even conquered Egypt itself, ruling as pharaohs during parts of ancient history. But despite that influence, much of their monumental architecture remained overlooked internationally for generations, and Nuri became one of the clearest examples of that forgotten history. More than 20 pyramids still stand at the site, though many are heavily damaged by erosion, collapsed stone, and centuries of neglect. Some belong to kings, others to queens and royal family members. The structures rise sharply from the desert with steep angles very different from the wider pyramids most people associate with Egypt. And when sunlight hits the stone during sunrise or sunset, the necropolis almost feels disconnected from the modern world completely. The most famous burial at Nuri belonged to King Taharqa, one of the most powerful Kushite rulers in history. Taharqa ruled during the 25th dynasty of Egypt, and became known across the ancient world through warfare, politics, and monumental construction projects. His pyramid at Nuri was once among the largest built in the region. That detail matters because it reveals how wealthy and organized the kingdom of Kush truly became. This was not a minor civilization copying Egypt. It was a major power shaping history directly. But over time, the kingdom declined. Trade systems changed, empires shifted, and eventually the royal necropolis faded into isolation, while desert sands slowly reclaimed parts of the site. That slow abandonment changed the atmosphere completely. Nuri does not feel like a preserved monument. It feels forgotten. And honestly, forgotten ruins affect people differently than famous ones. There's less noise, less certainty. The pyramids stand quietly in open desert where wind and silence dominate the landscape. Some visitors describe the experience as unsettling, because the site feels untouched emotionally, almost like history moved on without fully remembering the kingdom buried there. Archaeologists later discovered that many of the pyramids connected to underground burial chambers hidden beneath the structures themselves. Long stairways descended deep below the desert surface into flooded tomb systems, containing remnants of royal burials, artifacts, and ceremonial spaces. That underground world intensified the mystery surrounding Nuri enormously. Because beneath the visible pyramids, entire hidden chambers still existed below the sand. Some tombs became partially submerged over time as groundwater slowly filled lower burial areas. Researchers exploring sections of the necropolis describe descending into dark, flooded passages beneath the pyramids where ancient kings were once buried thousands of years ago. And honestly, that image feels almost cinematic. A forgotten pyramid kingdom hidden in the Sudanese desert, with submerged royal tombs still beneath the earth. Naturally, mystery theories followed. Lost treasures, hidden chambers sealed beneath the sand, forgotten African dynasties erased from history. Most of those stories became exaggerated online over time. But the real archaeology is already remarkable enough. A powerful civilization built royal pyramids across Sudan, while interacting directly with Egypt and the wider ancient world. That reality alone challenges how many people imagine ancient history. The site also reveals something important about memory itself. The pyramids never disappeared physically, they remained standing in the desert for centuries. What disappeared was global attention. History focused elsewhere while kingdoms like Kush slowly faded from mainstream awareness outside archaeology. And because of that, Nuri gained an eerie quality modern audiences rarely expect from pyramid landscapes. It feels hidden in plain sight. There's also the emotional contrast between scale and silence. The pyramids represent enormous labour, wealth, and royal ambition. Ancient rulers believed these tombs would preserve their names forever. Yet today many people around the world still know almost nothing about the civilization buried beneath them. That disconnect gives the site unusual weight psychologically. And maybe that's why Nuri continues haunting visitors today. Not because it holds impossible secrets, but because it preserves the remains of a powerful kingdom history nearly allowed itself to forget. The pyramids still rise from the desert exactly where Kushite rulers placed them thousands of years ago. The underground tombs still remain beneath the sand, and deep in the silence of Sudan, the forgotten royal necropolis continues waiting for the world to remember it again. The underground tomb that echoes forever. Long before the pyramids of Egypt were built, an enormous stone tomb already stood in the green hills of Ireland. Hidden beneath a massive circular mound, a narrow passage led deep underground into a chamber sealed by giant stones older than written history itself. And inside that chamber, something strange happens. Even the smallest sound doesn't disappear normally. It lingers, echoes through the darkness. And honestly, once you stand inside the tomb, it becomes very easy to understand why ancient people believed places like this connected to something beyond the ordinary world. The monument is known as New Grange, one of the most extraordinary prehistoric structures ever discovered. Built more than 5,000 years ago in what is now Ireland, the site predates Stonehenge and even the Great Pyramid of Giza. That timeline alone changes how people emotionally process the tomb, because modern audiences often underestimate prehistoric engineering completely. Then they see New Grange, and suddenly the ancient world starts feeling far more advanced than expected. From the outside, the structure appears as a massive grass-covered mound surrounded by large standing stones. But hidden inside is a carefully constructed stone passage stretching inward toward a central chamber deep beneath the earth. The corridor is narrow, enclosed, and lined with enormous stones carved with spirals, symbols, and geometric patterns still visible thousands of years later, and the deeper you move inside, the quieter the outside world becomes. Researchers believe New Grange served ceremonial and funerary purposes connected to death, rebirth, and astronomical observation. Human remains were discovered inside parts of the tomb, suggesting burial rituals happened here long ago. But the monument was clearly more than a grave. The scale, precision, and symbolic alignment reveal enormous spiritual importance to the people who built it. The most famous feature of New Grange happens during the winter solstice. For a brief moment each year, sunrise enters through a specially constructed opening above the entrance and travels directly down the passage, illuminating the inner chamber with golden light. That alignment is astonishingly precise. Ancient builders engineered the tomb so accurately that sunlight reaches the centre only during specific days of the year thousands of years later. And honestly, the first time modern researchers witnessed it properly, the effect felt almost supernatural. But there's another reason the tomb became legendary. The acoustics inside the chamber are deeply strange. Stone walls reflect sound in unusual ways, while the enclosed underground space amplifies echoes and low frequencies throughout the passage. Even soft voices can feel unnaturally powerful inside the darkness, and certain sounds seem to linger longer than expected before fading away completely. That atmosphere changes human perception immediately. Ancient people may not have understood acoustics scientifically, but they absolutely understood emotional experience. The builders knew darkness, stone, silence, and echo could transform how humans felt inside enclosed spaces. New Grange was not designed like ordinary shelter architecture. It was designed to affect the mind. There's also the psychological effect of the passage itself. The tomb forces visitors through a narrow stone corridor before reaching the central chamber. That movement matters. You descend away from daylight, away from open space, into enclosed darkness beneath thousands of tons of earth and stone. Then suddenly the chamber opens around you in silence. The transition feels ritualistic even today. The carvings surrounding New Grange deepen the mystery further. Spirals, circles, and abstract patterns appear across many stones throughout the monument. Their exact meanings remain uncertain. Some may represent cosmology, cycles, spiritual beliefs, or symbolic systems now lost entirely. That uncertainty makes the tomb feel even older emotionally. The builders left symbols behind, but not explanations. Naturally, myths surrounded the site for centuries. Irish folklore connected Newgrange to supernatural beings and hidden worlds beneath the hills. Some legends describe the mound as an entrance to the realm of gods or spirits. Others claim time moved differently inside the structure itself. And honestly, standing inside the chamber surrounded by ancient stone and echoing silence, those stories stop feeling completely irrational emotionally. The place genuinely feels disconnected from ordinary time. There's another remarkable detail too. The builders transported massive stones from long distances without modern machinery. Some materials came from regions far away across rivers and difficult terrain. That required planning, organisation, labour, and engineering skill on an astonishing level for the prehistoric world. People often imagine early societies as simple. Newgrange destroys that assumption completely. For centuries after its construction, the tomb gradually disappeared beneath earth and vegetation until later rediscovery brought it back into public awareness. That burial beneath the landscape added another layer to the atmosphere. The monument didn't collapse dramatically. It slept beneath the hills while generations passed overhead. And maybe that's why Newgrange continues haunting people today, not because of hidden treasure or impossible technology, but because it preserves a moment where ancient humans already understood how architecture, light, sound, and darkness could create something emotionally overwhelming. The tomb was built to be experienced, not just seen. Even now, deep beneath the grassy hills of Ireland, the stone chamber still waits in darkness. Voices still echo through the underground passage exactly as they did thousands of years ago. And every winter solstice, sunlight still enters the tomb once again, reaching the centre of the chamber like a message returning from another world, the lost ruins at the edge of the Arctic. At the very edge of the Arctic world, surrounded by icy fjords, freezing winds, and empty Greenlandic landscapes, the ruins of an ancient stone church still stand alone against the cold. No villages around it, no crowds, just broken stone walls facing the silence of Greenland exactly as they have for centuries. And what makes the ruins so unsettling is not only their isolation, it's the mystery surrounding the people who vanished from here afterward. Because Havalsi Church marks the last known written record of the Norse settlers of Greenland before they disappeared from history almost completely. Havalsi Church was built by Norse settlers sometime around the 13th or early 14th century in southern Greenland, during a period when Viking communities still survived across the harsh Arctic frontier. At first, that sounds impossible emotionally. Most people don't imagine medieval European settlements surviving in Greenland's freezing environment at all. But for centuries, Norse communities actually lived there. They built farms, churches, trading settlements, and entire communities stretched across parts of Greenland long before Columbus ever sailed west. Valsi itself became one of the most important Norse settlements in the region. The church was carefully constructed from massive stone blocks, fitted together with remarkable precision. Some stones weighed several tons. The walls were thick enough to survive Arctic weather for hundreds of years. And honestly, that durability is part of what makes the ruins feel haunting today. Because almost everything else disappeared. The church remained. The surrounding landscape intensifies the atmosphere immediately. Dark mountains rise behind the ruins. Cold water stretches through the fjords nearby. Fog and Arctic wind move constantly across the terrain. And unlike ruins surrounded by modern cities, Valsi feels isolated from ordinary time completely. Even today, reaching the site requires travelling through remote Greenlandic wilderness. The place still feels at the edge of the known world. But the real mystery began in the early 1400s, because in 1408, records mention a wedding held at Valsi Church between Thorstein Olafsson and Sigrid Björnsdottir. The event sounded ordinary, just another marriage ceremony inside a remote Norse settlement. But later, historians realised something terrifying. This wedding became the last confirmed written record of the Norse Greenlanders before they vanished from history. After that, silence. No clear final battle. No dramatic final message. No single confirmed explanation. The settlements gradually disappeared while the Arctic reclaimed the landscape around them. And honestly, that slow disappearance feels more unsettling than sudden destruction. Entire communities simply faded out of history at the edge of the frozen world. Researchers still debate what happened. Some believe worsening climate during the Little Ice Age made survival increasingly difficult. Others point toward trade collapse, isolation, famine, migration back toward Iceland or Norway, or conflict with Inuit populations moving through Greenland. The truth may involve several causes unfolding slowly across generations, but certainty never fully arrived, and that uncertainty became part of the legend surrounding Valsey forever. The ruins themselves are remarkably well preserved compared to many other Norse sites in Greenland. The stone walls still rise several metres high, window openings remain visible, the church shape can still be recognised clearly against the Arctic landscape, and because the roof disappeared long ago, the sky now hangs open directly above the old sanctuary. That image stays with people emotionally. A medieval church standing roofless beneath the Greenland sky, while the civilization around it vanished centuries ago. There's another reason Valsey feels psychologically powerful. It represents the edge of medieval expansion itself. These settlers pushed farther into the Arctic than most European communities of their time. They survived in conditions that already feel hostile even with modern technology, and for centuries they believed those settlements would continue. Then slowly, the world around them changed. The isolation also affects perception deeply. In crowded ruins, modern life is always nearby. At Valsey, silence dominates everything. Wind moves through the stone openings. Cold air echoes against the walls, and honestly, it becomes easy to imagine how terrifying Greenland winters must have felt for the final generations living there. Months of darkness, freezing storms, increasing isolation from Europe, the sense that the edge of the world was slowly closing around the settlement. Naturally, myths grew over time. Lost Viking colonies buried beneath ice, entire settlements hidden somewhere deeper inside Greenland, forgotten Norse treasure sealed beneath the frozen ground. Most of those stories remain legend, but the real mystery never disappeared. A civilization truly did vanish here, and nobody can explain every part of why. Even now, Valsey Church still stands beside the Arctic fjords of Greenland exactly where the Norse settlers built it centuries ago. The final wedding still echoes through history. The surrounding settlements remain mostly silent, and at the edge of the frozen world the ruins continue waiting beneath the cold Greenland sky long after the people who built them disappeared forever. The giant walls buried beneath the jungle. Deep inside the jungles of Cambodia, ancient stone walls rise through the trees like fragments of a civilization the forest tried to erase. Roots twist through collapsed stairways. Vines cover carved stone. Entire sections of the ruins disappear beneath thick vegetation, until architecture and jungle become almost impossible to separate. And hidden among these forgotten structures stands Baksy Chamkrong, a temple ruin surrounded by giant stone walls and silent jungle paths that still feel untouched by time. Because unlike the crowded monuments most people recognize from Angkor, this place feels abandoned in a very different way. Quieter, older, almost hidden on purpose. Baksy Chamkrong was built during the Khmer Empire near the ancient city of Angkor in what is now Cambodia. The structure dates back roughly to the 10th century and was dedicated to the Hindu god Shiva during a period when Khmer rulers were constructing enormous ceremonial cities across the region. But compared to larger temples nearby, Baksy Chamkrong remained smaller, more isolated, and eventually more heavily consumed by the surrounding jungle. That isolation changed the atmosphere of the site completely. The temple rises like a stone pyramid, surrounded by thick forest growth and remnants of ancient walls, partially buried beneath earth and vegetation. Steep stairways climb upward toward the sanctuary tower at the summit, while broken stone blocks remain scattered throughout the area below. And honestly, what affects people most is not the size of the ruin. It's how the jungle slowly absorbs everything around it. The forest does not simply surround the temple, it invades it. Researchers believe Baksy Chamkrong served both ceremonial and royal symbolic purposes connected to Khmer kingship and Hindu cosmology. Like many Khmer temples, the structure likely represented sacred mountains tied to divine order and spiritual authority. The pyramid design itself carried meaning. Ascending the structure symbolized movement toward higher sacred space separated from the ordinary world below. That psychological layering mattered enormously in Khmer architecture. But over centuries, the jungle transformed the ruins into something far stranger emotionally. Stone cracked beneath massive tree roots. Walls collapsed under moisture and heat. Entire sections disappeared beneath soil and vegetation growth, and because tropical environments consume abandoned architecture so aggressively, the temple eventually looked less like construction and more like part of the landscape itself. That transformation creates a very specific atmosphere around jungle ruins. Desert ruins feel exposed, jungle ruins feel hidden, the forest blocks visibility, muffles sound, and constantly creates the sense that something larger remains buried deeper beyond what you can actually see. Baxi Chamkrong carries that feeling everywhere. The giant walls surrounding parts of the complex intensify the mystery further. Some remain partially intact while others vanish beneath roots and collapsed stone. Walking through the area, visitors often see only fragments at first. A staircase here, a carved block there, before larger sections emerge through the trees unexpectedly. The architecture reveals itself slowly, and honestly, that gradual discovery changes how the ruins affect people psychologically. The jungle controls what you see and when you see it. There's another important reason the site became emotionally powerful. The Khmer Empire itself was one of the most advanced civilizations in Southeast Asia, capable of building enormous urban and ceremonial systems connected through reservoirs, canals, and monumental temples across huge territories. Angkor was not simply a city, it was an engineered landscape, and places like Baxi Chamkrong reveal how deeply architecture, religion, and environment were connected within that civilization. Naturally, myths developed around the ruins over time: hidden chambers beneath the jungle floor, lost royal treasures sealed behind collapsed walls, secret tunnels connecting forgotten temples through the forest underground. Most of those stories remain unverified, but honestly, the environment itself encourages imagination constantly. Dense jungle makes every ruin feel incomplete. Like most of the civilization still remains hidden somewhere beneath the trees. The stone carvings surviving at Baxi Chamkrong also matter enormously. Even after centuries of erosion, traces of decorative details remain visible on parts of the temple. Doorways, reliefs, fragments of sacred imagery weathered by rain and tropical heat. The surviving artwork reveals how elaborate the site once looked, before nature reclaimed large sections of it. And that contrast between beauty and decay gives the ruins unusual emotional weight. There's also the sound of the jungle itself, wind moving through leaves, distant insects, bird calls echoing between stone walls. Unlike ruins in open desert silence, jungle ruins are never truly quiet. The environment feels alive around them constantly, and sometimes that makes the abandoned architecture feel even more isolated somehow. Researchers continue studying smaller Khmer sites, like Baxi Chamkrong, because many structures around Angkor remain partially buried or hidden beneath vegetation even today. Modern technology, including LiDAR scanning, has revealed ancient roads, reservoirs, and urban systems previously invisible beneath the forest canopy. That means enormous sections of the Khmer world still remain concealed beneath the jungle landscape. And honestly, that possibility changes how people see the forest itself. The trees may be covering far more history than anyone realizes, and maybe that's why ruins like Baxi Chamkrong continue haunting visitors today. Not because they contain supernatural mysteries, but because they preserve the feeling of a civilization slowly disappearing back into nature. Stone sinking beneath roots, walls swallowed by jungle growth, entire sacred spaces fading beneath centuries of silence and rain. Even now, the giant walls of Baxi Chamkrong still stand hidden among the forests of Cambodia. Broken stairways still rise through the trees, ancient stones still wait beneath layers of roots and earth, and somewhere beneath the jungle canopy, parts of the forgotten Khmer world may still remain buried exactly where time left them behind. The lost kingdom hidden beneath the jungle. Deep inside the jungles of Mexico, enormous stone pyramids rise above the trees like the remains of a forgotten empire swallowed by the forest. No massive cities surround them anymore. No royal processions. No crowds filling the ancient plazas. Just jungle stretching endlessly in every direction, while broken temples stand silently beneath the heat and rain. And hidden there for centuries was one of the most powerful cities the Maya civilization ever built, Calakmul, a kingdom so influential that it once rivaled Tikal itself for control of the ancient Maya world. Yet for generations the jungle nearly erased it completely. Calakmul lies deep in the Yucatan region of southern Mexico inside dense tropical forest, far from most modern urban centres. The isolation of the site matters enormously. Unlike ruins sitting beside modern towns, Calakmul still feels difficult to reach. The jungle dominates everything around it. Roads narrow into forest paths. Sound changes beneath the trees, and honestly, by the time visitors arrive, the ruins already feel disconnected from ordinary reality. At its height, Calakmul was one of the largest and most powerful Maya cities ever constructed. Researchers believe tens of thousands of people once lived throughout the surrounding region, connected by roads, reservoirs, ceremonial plazas, and massive pyramid complexes hidden beneath the jungle canopy. This was not a small religious site. It was a major political and military power shaping the history of the Maya civilization for centuries. The city became especially famous for its rivalry with Tikal, another enormous Maya kingdom located farther south in modern Guatemala. For generations, these two powers competed through warfare, alliances, politics, and regional influence across the Maya world. Ancient inscriptions reveal kings, battles, and shifting power struggles stretching across centuries. And honestly, that history changes how the ruins feel emotionally. These temples were not isolated monuments. They belong to a living empire. The pyramids themselves dominate the landscape. Structure 2, one of the largest at the site, rises high above the jungle canopy. Climbing it today still feels surreal because trees stretch endlessly toward the horizon in every direction. From the summit, the forest almost looks infinite, and somewhere beneath that green canopy lie thousands of additional ruins, homes, roads, and structures still hidden underground. That realization is what makes Calakmul feel so mysterious. The visible ruins are only part of the city. The jungle transformed the site dramatically after the civilization declined. Roots pushed through stairways. Vegetation buried plazas. Entire structures disappeared beneath soil and trees over centuries. Unlike desert ruins left exposed, tropical ruins become absorbed into nature itself. The forest slowly erases shape, sound, and visibility until entire cities vanish beneath the landscape. And for long periods, that's exactly what happened to Calakmul. Researchers only fully began understanding the scale of the city after modern archaeological surveys and LiDAR technology revealed enormous hidden networks beneath the forest canopy. Road systems, platforms, residential districts, ceremonial complexes extending far beyond the visible excavation zones. The jungle had concealed one of the greatest ancient cities in the Americas almost completely. And honestly, LiDAR changed archaeology in the Maya world forever. Suddenly, the forest stopped looking empty. Ancient infrastructure appeared beneath the trees everywhere. Entire forgotten urban systems hidden for centuries became visible through technology capable of seeing beneath vegetation. Calakmul became one of the clearest examples of how much history still remained buried under the jungle. The Maya civilization itself remains deeply fascinating because of its sophistication. Astronomy, mathematics, writing systems, architecture, political alliances. The civilization developed highly advanced knowledge across multiple fields long before European contact, and cities like Calakmul prove how organized and interconnected the Maya world truly became. But eventually, the great cities declined, populations decreased, construction slowed, political systems fractured, and over generations the jungle reclaimed enormous sections of the urban landscape. Researchers still debate exactly why many Maya cities declined, but climate pressure, warfare, environmental strain, and political instability likely all contributed together. The collapse was probably gradual rather than sudden, and honestly, gradual collapse always feels heavier emotionally. Naturally, myths grew around the ruins over time. Lost treasure hidden beneath pyramids, secret tunnels under the jungle floor, ancient curses protecting royal tombs. Most of those stories belong more to legend than archaeology. But the atmosphere of Calakmul encourages imagination constantly. The forest blocks visibility so completely that it always feels like something larger remains hidden nearby. There's also the sound of the jungle itself. Birds echo through the canopy. Wind moves through leaves above broken temples. Insects fill the silence constantly. Unlike abandoned ruins in deserts, Calakmul never feels still. the city feels surrounded by life while remaining completely abandoned by the civilization that built it. That contrast becomes strangely emotional. The carved stelae throughout the city preserve fragments of Maya rulers and historical events even after centuries of erosion. Faces, names, political victories, royal symbolism still emerging from weathered stone. The kingdom tried to preserve its memory permanently through monuments, yet eventually the jungle covered much of it anyway. And maybe that's why Calakmul continues haunting visitors today. Not because it contains impossible mysteries, but because it reveals how even enormous civilizations can disappear beneath nature over time. A city once filled with rulers, ceremonies, and thousands of people now survives mostly through broken pyramids rising above endless forest. Even now, the temples of Calakmul still stand hidden deep inside the jungles of Mexico. Ancient stairways still climb toward the canopy. Stone pyramids still rise above the trees. And beneath the forest floor, huge parts of the lost Maya kingdom may still remain buried exactly where the jungle covered them centuries ago. The desert temple built for forgotten gods. In the deserts of southwestern Iran, an enormous stepped structure still rises from the earth beneath the burning sun. Its walls are cracked, its upper levels partially destroyed, and much of the city surrounding it has disappeared into dust and silence. But even after more than 3,000 years, the massive ziggurat of Chogha-Zanbil still dominates the landscape like the remains of a forgotten world. Because long before Persia became one of history's greatest empires, another civilization already stood here building monumental temples for gods most people no longer even remember. Chogha-Zanbil was built by the ancient Elamite civilization around the 13th century BCE in what is now modern-day Iran. The Elamites were one of the oldest major cultures of the ancient Near East, interacting with Mesopotamia, Babylon, and neighbouring kingdoms for centuries. Yet compared to Egypt or Babylon, much of their civilization faded from popular memory over time. And honestly, that forgotten history gives Chogha-Zanbil a very different atmosphere from more famous ancient monuments. The site feels isolated from modern attention, almost abandoned by history itself. At the centre of the complex stands the Great Ziggurat, a massive stepped temple structure originally built with multiple ascending levels towering above the surrounding plains. Unlike pyramids built mainly as tombs, ziggurats functioned as sacred religious platforms connected to worship and divine authority. Ancient people believed the upper sections brought priests symbolically closer to the gods above. The structure itself became a bridge between earth and sky. The scale of Chogha-Zanbil shocked archaeologists once major excavations began. The city surrounding the ziggurat was carefully planned with walls, gates, temples, reservoirs, and ceremonial areas organized across a large sacred complex. This was not an isolated tower in the desert. It was an enormous religious city built intentionally around spiritual power and royal identity, and much of it remained buried beneath earth and sand for centuries before rediscovery. The bricks themselves contain one of the site's most fascinating details. Many were inscribed with cuneiform texts naming the ruler Untashnapirisha, who ordered the construction of the city and temple complex. Those inscriptions still survive on thousands of bricks throughout the ruins. Imagine building a monument so large that your name becomes physically embedded into the walls themselves. That level of ambition reveals how important the project truly was, and honestly, the desert environment changes everything emotionally. Heat rises from the stone, open plains stretch endlessly around the ruins, wind moves across broken walls that once enclosed sacred ceremonial spaces filled with priests and worshippers. The isolation feels overwhelming. Unlike ruins surrounded by modern development, Chogha-Zanbil still feels separated from ordinary life. Researchers believe the site was dedicated primarily to major Elamite gods, including Inshushinak, one of the civilization's most important deities. But over time, the religious world that created the ziggurat vanished almost completely. Languages changed, empires collapsed, belief systems disappeared. Today, most people could not name a single Elamite god, despite the civilization once constructing monuments on an enormous scale. That disappearance creates a strange emotional effect around the ruins. The architecture survived, the religion mostly did not. There's another reason the site became mysterious historically. Chogha-Zanbil appears to have been abandoned relatively early compared to what its builders intended. The city never fully became the long-lasting royal and religious centre, Untasnapirisha envisioned. After invasions and political instability weakened the region, parts of the complex declined while the desert slowly reclaimed the surrounding landscape. The project feels unfinished emotionally, like a monumental dream interrupted before reaching its full future. Naturally, myths developed around the ruins over centuries. Hidden chambers beneath the ziggurat, lost treasures sealed under the temple foundations, ancient curses protecting forgotten gods. Some local legends even described spirits wandering the abandoned sacred city after dark. Most of those stories belong more to folklore than archaeology. But honestly, giant abandoned temples in open desert almost automatically generate mythology. The structure itself also feels older than many people emotionally expect. The ziggurat predates the Persian Empire entirely. It belongs to a much earlier chapter of Middle Eastern civilization many modern audiences rarely think about. And standing beside the ruins forces people to realize how many powerful cultures existed long before the better-known empires dominating history books today. There's also the psychological effect of stepped architecture. Each level rises higher while reducing accessible space gradually toward the summit. That movement upward changes perception. You physically separate from the ordinary world below step by step. Ancient builders understood how architecture could control emotion through movement long before modern psychology existed. The ziggurat was not only symbolic, it was experiential. Archaeologists continue studying the surrounding ruins because large sections of the ancient city still remain partially buried beneath the desert. Walls, structures, and ceremonial areas continue emerging through excavation and remote surveys. That means much of the sacred landscape connected to Chogha-Zanbil may still remain hidden underground even now. And honestly, that possibility changes how empty the surrounding desert feels once you understand what lies beneath it. And maybe that's why Chogha-Zanbil continues haunting visitors today. Not because it contains impossible mysteries, but because it preserves the remains of a forgotten religious world that once believed these massive structures connected humanity directly to divine power. The gods vanished from memory, the civilization collapsed. But the great temple still stands in the desert, exactly where ancient builders raised it more than 3,000 years ago, a stone city carved inside the mountains. In the valleys of central Turkey, entire homes, churches, tunnels and chambers were carved directly into the rock itself. Not built with stone blocks, not assembled like ordinary cities, but hollowed out from the mountains as though the landscape itself had been transformed into a hidden civilization. And spread across the strange volcanic terrain of Görem, the structures still feel almost unreal today. Because from a distance, the region barely looks natural at all. Tall stone towers rise from the earth like giant pillars. Caves open across cliff walls. Entire settlements disappear inside the mountains. And honestly, the first time people see Göreme, many assume it belongs more to fantasy than history. Göreme is located in Cappadocia, one of the most geologically unusual regions in Turkey. Millions of years ago, volcanic eruptions covered the landscape with soft stone known as tuff. Over enormous stretches of time, wind and erosion shaped the terrain into towering formations now called fairy chimneys. But humans eventually discovered something important about the rock. It was soft enough to carve, and that discovery changed the entire landscape forever. Ancient communities began cutting homes, storage rooms, tunnels, monasteries and churches directly into the stone formations. Over centuries, entire underground and cliffside settlements expanded across the valleys. People slept inside the mountains, cooked inside the mountains, prayed inside the mountains. The landscape itself became architecture, and honestly, that's what makes Görem feel so unsettling emotionally. The city doesn't sit on the land, it exists inside it. Some of the most famous structures are the rock-cut churches hidden throughout the region. Inside many caves, ancient Christian communities painted frescoes across walls and ceilings deep beneath the stone. Images of saints, crosses, and biblical scenes still survive in certain chambers despite centuries of erosion and abandonment. Walking into these spaces feels surreal. From the outside, they appear like ordinary cave openings. Then suddenly entire sacred rooms emerge beneath the rock, filled with faded paintings and silence. Researchers believe early Christian groups used parts of Cappadocia as places of refuge during periods of political instability and persecution. The geography made the region ideal for hidden communities. Narrow valleys concealed entrances, Underground tunnels connected different areas. Some settlements could even be sealed off during danger. And because so much of the architecture blended naturally into the landscape, outsiders could easily overlook entire inhabited areas from a distance. There's another reason Ureme became famous historically. The region contains enormous underground cities extending multiple levels beneath the earth. Places like Derinkuyu and Kaimaklu reveal networks of tunnels, storage chambers, ventilation shafts, and hidden rooms capable of sheltering thousands of people. That discovery changed how archaeologists viewed the region completely. The visible structures were only part of the story. A second hidden world existed underground beneath the valleys themselves, and honestly, underground spaces change human perception immediately. Darkness compresses sound. Air feels different. Stone walls absorb movement unnaturally. Ancient people may not have understood psychology scientifically, but they absolutely understood atmosphere. The carved chambers of Gureme were not only practical, they created emotional separation from the outside world completely. The landscape itself also intensifies the mystery enormously. At sunrise and sunset, the stone towers glow red and gold beneath shifting light. Fog moves through the valleys. Cliff openings cast deep shadows across the terrain. The environment already feels dreamlike before the ancient structures even appear. And because so much of the city blends directly into the rock, the ruins often reveal themselves gradually instead of immediately. A dark opening becomes a room, a crack becomes a tunnel, a hillside becomes an entire hidden settlement. Naturally, myths developed around Cappadocia for centuries, hidden treasure chambers beneath the valleys, secret religious communities sealed underground, ancient tunnels stretching endlessly beneath the mountains. Some legends even claimed entire lost cities remained undiscovered deeper inside the rock formations, and honestly, the environment makes those stories feel believable emotionally. The landscape constantly suggests more hidden space beyond what you can actually see. The engineering behind the settlements also remains astonishing. Ventilation systems carried air deep underground. Storage areas preserved food supplies. Stone doors could block tunnel entrances during invasion. Entire communities survived within environments carved entirely by hand over generations. This was not primitive shelter. It was organized architectural adaptation on a massive scale. There's also something psychologically fascinating about carved architecture compared to built architecture. Constructed buildings feel temporary. Carved spaces feel permanent. The mountains themselves became homes, churches, and sanctuaries. That changes how humans emotionally interpret the ruins. The city feels less like something added to nature, and more like something revealed from inside it. Even after centuries of abandonment and erosion, large parts of Gureme still survive remarkably well, because the volcanic stone preserved internal spaces from complete collapse. Frescoes remain visible. Tunnel systems remain accessible. Entire chambers still hold their original shape beneath the cliffs. And because the region stayed inhabited for long periods, ancient and modern life continued overlapping in unusual ways across the valleys. Maybe that's why Gureme continues affecting visitors so strongly today. Not because of impossible mysteries, but because the region feels like a civilization hidden between worlds. Part city, part mountain, part underground labyrinth. A place where humans reshaped the landscape so completely that architecture and geology became impossible to separate anymore. The ancient tombs above the clouds. High in the hills of Western Ireland, ancient stone tombs sit silently above the landscape surrounded by wind, fog, and empty sky. No cities nearby, no massive tourist crowds, just isolated megalithic chambers scattered across the mountains as though they were placed there to watch the world from above. And honestly, reaching Archaeological already feels strange before the tombs even appear. The climb is steep. The hills become quieter. Fog moves across the landscape without warning. Then suddenly, massive stone structures emerge from the earth, exactly where ancient people built them more than 5,000 years ago. Archaeological is one of the oldest megalithic cemetery complexes in Ireland, dating back to the Neolithic period thousands of years before written history began. The site contains multiple passage tombs spread across remote hilltops in County Sligo, and unlike many ancient monuments surrounded by modern development, Archaeological still feels isolated from ordinary life almost completely. That isolation changes everything emotionally. the tombs do not feel preserved. They feel forgotten. The structures themselves are built from enormous stone slabs arranged into circular cairns, with narrow passages leading toward inner burial chambers. Many of the tombs align carefully with sunlight and surrounding landscapes in ways ancient builders almost certainly planned intentionally. This was not random construction. People carried massive stones up remote hills and assembled ceremonial structures with extraordinary precision thousands of years ago. And honestly, that scale of effort becomes difficult to process once you stand there yourself. Researchers believe Carrowkeel served as both burial ground and ceremonial landscape connected to death, ancestry, and spiritual belief. Human remains were discovered inside several chambers along with artifacts and traces of ritual activity. But like many prehistoric sites, the people who built the tombs left no written explanations behind. Only stone, only alignment, only silence. And that uncertainty became part of the mystery itself. The atmosphere surrounding Carrowkeel is unlike almost anywhere else. Because the tombs sit high above the surrounding valleys, weather changes rapidly across the hills, sunlight can disappear behind fog within minutes, wind moves constantly through the grass and stone entrances, and when clouds roll across the mountains, the entire cemetery almost vanishes into the landscape. That visual isolation feels deeply intentional somehow, as though the dead were placed closer to the sky itself. Some of the passage tombs become especially fascinating during certain seasonal sun alignments. Light enters sections of the chambers during specific times of year, illuminating spaces hidden deep inside the stone structures. That level of astronomical awareness reveals something important about the builders. These were not simple survival communities randomly stacking rocks. They understood landscape, movement, light and ritual symbolism with astonishing sophistication. And honestly, prehistoric tombs affect people differently than later ruins. There are no kings carved into walls, no surviving inscriptions explaining events, just ancient stone chambers older than recorded history itself. The monuments feel disconnected from names and timelines completely. That anonymity gives Carrowkeel unusual emotional weight. The tombs belong to a human world almost impossible to fully imagine now. Naturally, myths surrounded the hills for centuries. Irish folklore connected ancient passage tombs to spirits, hidden worlds, and supernatural beings living beneath the earth. Some stories described the cairns as entrances to another realm, hidden under the mountains. Others claimed strange lights appeared around the hills at night. And honestly, standing among the tombs while fog moves across the landscape, those legends stop feeling entirely irrational emotionally. The environment already feels dreamlike before mythology even begins. The construction itself also remains remarkable. Massive stones had to be transported uphill without modern machinery across rough terrain. The chambers were carefully balanced to survive thousands of years of weather and erosion. Some tombs still preserve internal roof structures despite their age. Ancient builders clearly possessed deep engineering. Understanding passed through generations long before formal architecture existed. There's another reason Carrowkeel feels different from more famous monuments. Silence dominates the site. No urban noise, no roads nearby. Only wind, birds, and distant movement across the hills. That quiet changes how visitors experience the tomb psychologically. The cemetery feels removed from modern time entirely, almost suspended between worlds. Archaeologists continue studying the region because the surrounding landscape likely contains additional buried features and ceremonial areas not yet fully excavated. Ancient pathways, smaller cairns, and hidden structures may still remain beneath the hills even today. That possibility makes the landscape itself feel unfinished archaeologically, like the mountains are still hiding parts of the cemetery beneath the earth. And maybe that's why Carrowkeel continues haunting people today. Not because it contains impossible secrets, but because it preserves one of humanity's oldest relationships with death, memory, and the sky above. Ancient people climbed these remote hills carrying stone and ceremony into the clouds, long before written history began. Then they disappeared, while the tombs remained. The tower, older than civilization. Long before kingdoms, pyramids, or written language existed, people were already building something massive from stone in the ancient lands near the Jordan Valley. Not a palace, not a fortress, a tower. An enormous circular stone tower rising above one of the oldest settlements ever discovered on Earth. And honestly, the first thing that unsettled archaeologists about Jericho wasn't only its construction, it was its age. Because the tower was built nearly 10,000 years ago, during a period when many people still imagined humans living only in small, primitive communities struggling to survive. Yet someone here organised labour, moved heavy stone, and constructed monumental architecture thousands of years before civilization was supposed to fully exist. The ancient city of Jericho, located near the Jordan River in the modern West Bank region, is often considered one of the oldest continuously inhabited settlements in human history. People lived there during the Neolithic period when agriculture was only beginning to transform human society. And buried beneath layers of later occupation, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary: a giant stone tower connected to some of the earliest known monumental construction ever attempted by humanity. The tower stands roughly 8.5 metres tall and was built from carefully stacked stone blocks beside a massive wall surrounding the ancient settlement. Inside, a staircase climbs upward through the structure, using stone steps still visible thousands of years later. That detail matters enormously. This was not random stone piling. The builders planned the structure carefully. They understood weight, balance, labour organisation, and design on a scale historians once thought impossible for such an early society. And honestly, the tower feels strangely modern emotionally. Not visually modern, but conceptually, because it represents something larger than survival. Ancient humans here were already thinking symbolically, collectively, and architecturally far earlier than many people imagine. The structure required cooperation from large groups working together toward a common goal. That level of organisation changes how we understand early humanity completely. Researchers still debate the exact purpose of the tower even today. Some believe it served defensive functions connected to the surrounding wall, protecting the settlement. Others think it held ceremonial or astronomical significance. A few researchers suggested the tower may have aligned with seasonal solar patterns or nearby mountains in meaningful ways. And honestly, the uncertainty is part of what makes the structure feel so mysterious, because nobody can fully explain why people this ancient suddenly decided to build something so massive. The staircase inside the tower adds another psychological layer. Ascending narrow stone steps through enclosed space changes perception immediately. Movement upward becomes ritualistic, separated from the outside settlement. Ancient builders repeatedly used elevation symbolically across civilizations, and Jericho may preserve one of the earliest examples of that instinct. The tower was not only functional, it was experiential. There's another astonishing detail too. The tower predates pottery in the region. That timeline is difficult to emotionally process. People built monumental stone architecture before many basic technologies usually associated with settled civilization had fully developed. That means organised large-scale construction emerged incredibly early in human social history, much earlier than older historical models once assumed. The environment surrounding Jericho also matters enormously. The settlement existed near water sources and fertile land in an otherwise harsh region. That stability likely allowed communities to remain in one place long enough for larger projects to become possible. Agriculture changed human behaviour permanently, and structures like the tower reveal what happened once humans stopped moving constantly and began reshaping landscapes intentionally. Naturally, mystery theories later surrounded the site: lost prehistoric civilizations, unknown ancient knowledge, hidden chambers buried beneath the tower foundations. Most of those stories stretch far beyond archaeological evidence, but honestly the real discovery is already extraordinary enough. Humans nearly 10,000 years ago organised one of the oldest monumental building projects on Earth. That reality alone feels almost unbelievable. There's also something emotionally strange about structures this old surviving at all. Empires rose and collapsed afterward. Languages disappeared. Religions changed. Entire civilizations emerged long after the Jericho Tower already stood beside the settlement. The structure existed closer to humanity's earliest urban beginnings than to most later historical periods people usually think about, and somehow parts of it still remain. The surrounding settlement revealed additional fascinating details too: ancient homes, burial practices, evidence of organised community life already taking shape around the tower. Jericho was not isolated construction in empty land. It belonged to one of humanity's earliest experiments in permanent settlement and social organisation. The tower became part of a much larger transformation happening across human history. And maybe that's why the structure continues haunting archaeologists today. Not because it contains supernatural mystery, but because it forces modern people to rethink how intelligent, organised, and ambitious early humans already were at the dawn of civilization itself. The builders left no written explanation behind, no surviving rulers' names, only stone rising from the earth thousands of years before history officially began, the stone fortress, above the sea. High on a rocky plateau in Sardinia, ancient stone walls stretch across the landscape overlooking the distant sea. Wind moves constantly through the hills, fog rolls across the cliffs without warning, and scattered across the mountaintop are the remains of one of the strangest prehistoric structures in the Mediterranean world, Monte Baranta, a massive megalithic complex built thousands of years ago by people who left behind almost no written explanation for why it was created. And honestly, the site feels unsettling the moment you arrive, because it doesn't fully resemble a fortress, or a temple, or a settlement. It feels like all three at once. Monte Baranta is located in northern Sardinia and dates back to the Bronze Age, long before the rise of classical Rome. The structure sits high above the surrounding terrain with commanding views stretching toward the coastline and valleys below. Its location was clearly chosen carefully. Ancient builders carried enormous stone blocks onto the plateau and assembled defensive walls, ceremonial areas, and megalithic features directly into the rocky landscape itself. That level of effort alone reveals the site carried enormous importance. The most striking part of Monte Baranta is the giant curved wall built from massive stones fitted together across the hilltop. Some sections still stand impressively high even after thousands of years of erosion and collapse. The structure resembles a fortress at first glance, but archaeologists quickly realize something strange. The walls alone don't fully explain the site, because nearby stand ceremonial stones, elevated platforms, and open spaces suggesting ritual or symbolic activity also happened there. That uncertainty became the heart of the mystery. Was Monte Baranta defensive, religious, astronomical, a gathering place? Researchers still debate aspects of the complex because the site refuses to fit neatly into one category. And honestly, prehistoric monuments often become most fascinating exactly when their purpose remains unclear. The surrounding landscape intensifies the atmosphere enormously. Sardinia already feels ancient in certain regions. Rocky hills, isolated valleys, and windswept coastlines scattered with prehistoric ruins older than many famous European civilizations. But Monte Baranta feels especially isolated. The plateau rises above the terrain like a natural stronghold, separated from ordinary life below. Standing there, it becomes easy to understand why ancient people viewed the location as powerful. Some archaeologists believe the site may have served as both ceremonial centre and defensive refuge simultaneously. Ancient communities often blended spiritual and practical architecture together rather than separating them the way modern societies do. The walls may have protected gatherings, rituals, or elite activities tied to social identity and belief. That combination would explain why the complex contains both fortress-like and ceremonial features. There's another fascinating detail too. Near parts of the structure stand large upright stones, and megalithic features aligned carefully within the landscape. Some researchers proposed possible astronomical connections involving sunlight and seasonal movement across the plateau. While evidence remains debated, ancient builders throughout Europe repeatedly aligned monuments with celestial events. And honestly, Monte Baranta already feels like the kind of place where sky and landscape mattered deeply. The age of the site changes everything emotionally too. Monte Baranta was built during a prehistoric world with no written records explaining the builder's intentions directly. No surviving kings' names, no carved histories, only stone walls, standing rocks, and fragments of architecture exposed to wind and weather for thousands of years. That silence gives the ruins unusual psychological weight. The site survives physically, while its original meaning faded almost completely. Naturally, myths grew around the plateau over generations. Ancient giants building the walls, sacred rituals beneath the stars, hidden chambers beneath the stones. Some local legends even connected the ruins to mysterious lights or supernatural events seen across the hills at night. Most of those stories belong more to folklore than archaeology, but honestly, isolated megalithic sites almost automatically generate mythology, especially when their true purpose remains uncertain. The construction itself still impresses researchers today. Transporting and positioning massive stones across rugged hilltop terrain required organisation, labour and engineering skill far beyond what older generations once assumed prehistoric societies possessed. Monte Baranta proves ancient communities in Sardinia were capable of monumental planning long before written civilization reached the island. There's also the psychological effect of the walls themselves. Unlike later castles or urban fortifications, the barriers at Monte Baranta feel strangely primal. Huge rough stones stacked against open sky and sea. The structure blends into the natural rock around it instead of dominating the environment artificially. That integration makes the ruins feel older emotionally than many later monuments, almost elemental. And because the site remains far less famous internationally than many Mediterranean ruins, parts of Monte Baranta still preserve genuine silence. Visitors often hear only wind moving across the plateau and distant sounds from the valleys below. No city noise, no heavy crowds, just ancient stone overlooking the sea exactly as it has for thousands of years. That quiet changes how people experience the ruins completely. Maybe that's why Monte Baranta continues haunting archaeologists and travellers today. Not because it contains impossible secrets, but because it preserves a fragment of prehistoric Europe that still refuses to fully explain itself. A fortress, a sanctuary, a ceremonial landscape above the sea. The builders disappeared long ago, but the stones remained watching the horizon long after their world faded into history. The ancient mound filled with hidden passages. In the green hills of Ireland, an enormous mound rises quietly from the landscape surrounded by ancient stones older than the pyramids themselves. From the outside, it almost looks natural, just a grassy hill beneath the sky. But hidden inside the mound are underground chambers, stone passages, and mysterious carvings sealed beneath the earth for more than 5,000 years. The site is called Noth, and honestly, the deeper archaeologists explored it, the stranger the place became. Because this wasn't just one tomb, it was an entire ceremonial complex built by people who understood architecture, astronomy, and symbolism long before written history began. Noth is part of the Brúna Bóinne complex in Ireland, alongside famous sites like Newgrange and Douth. The monument dates back to the Neolithic period, making it older than Stonehenge and older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. That timeline alone feels difficult to process emotionally. Ancient people were moving enormous stones and building underground ceremonial structures thousands of years before most civilizations people normally imagine even existed. At the centre of the site stands a giant circular mound surrounded by smaller satellite tombs and massive curbstones carved with spirals, symbols, and geometric patterns. Beneath the mound, long stone passages extend inward toward burial chambers hidden deep underground. And unlike many ancient tombs containing only a single corridor, Noth includes multiple passage systems built into the structure itself. That complexity surprised archaeologists immediately. The carvings throughout the site became one of its greatest mysteries. Noth contains the largest collection of megalithic art in Western Europe. Stone surfaces are covered with spirals, circles, zigzags, and abstract symbols whose meanings remain uncertain even today. Some researchers believe the carvings represented cosmology, ritual belief, or astronomical cycles. Others think they marked sacred boundaries, or encoded symbolic knowledge now lost completely. The truth remains uncertain, and honestly, that uncertainty makes the site feel even older somehow. The passages themselves create an eerie atmosphere underground. Narrow stone corridors force visitors deeper beneath the mound into enclosed chambers hidden from the outside world entirely. Sound changes immediately. Air feels colder. Light disappears behind you as you descend into the structure. Ancient builders clearly understood how movement through confined space could affect human emotion, long before psychology existed formally. The tomb was designed to be experienced physically. There's another fascinating detail too. Researchers discovered that the passages at Noth align closely with solar movement during the equinoxes. Sunlight enters the eastern and western passages at specific times of year, illuminating sections of the chambers beneath the mound. That level of precision required careful observation of the sky over long periods. These were not primitive communities randomly stacking stones. The builders understood astronomy, landscape alignment, and ceremonial architecture with astonishing sophistication. And honestly, the scale of labour becomes almost impossible to imagine once you understand the site's age. Massive stones had to be transported across large distances without wheels, metal tools, or modern machinery. Entire communities likely worked together for generations to complete the mound and surrounding monuments. The structure represents organised collective effort on a scale modern audiences often underestimate completely when thinking about prehistoric humanity. Over time, Noth changed repeatedly. Later cultures reused parts of the mound. Medieval settlers built structures nearby. Ancient chambers were reopened and disturbed across different historical periods. That layering makes the site feel less like frozen history and more like a place continuously revisited by humans across thousands of years. The mound never fully disappeared from memory. It remained part of the landscape while civilizations rose and collapsed around it. Naturally, myths surrounded the site for centuries. Irish folklore connected ancient mounds to hidden worlds beneath the earth and supernatural beings living inside the hills. Some legends described passage tombs as entrances into another realm, where time moved differently. Others claimed strange lights appeared near the mounds during certain nights. And honestly, standing beside Noth in fog or fading evening light, those stories stop feeling completely irrational emotionally. The place already feels disconnected from ordinary time. The surrounding landscape intensifies everything too. Rolling green hills stretch outward beneath open sky, while the mound rises quietly among them. Unlike towering monuments designed to dominate visually, Noth hides much of its complexity underground. The mystery exists beneath the surface. That hidden architecture changes how visitors emotionally interpret the site. The hill itself becomes secretive. Researchers still believe large sections of the ceremonial landscape around Noth remain partially unexplored archaeologically. Additional features, buried structures, and ancient pathways may still exist beneath the surrounding earth. That possibility makes the entire valley feel layered with hidden history, as though the landscape itself still contains memories sealed underground. And maybe that's why Noth continues haunting people today. Not because it contains impossible supernatural secrets, but because it preserves evidence of a prehistoric world already thinking symbolically, astronomically, and architecturally at an astonishing level. Thousands of years before written civilization officially began, the builders disappeared, their language vanished, their beliefs faded into silence. But the mound remained. The island tomb, covered in forgotten symbols. Off the coast of Brittany, on a small island surrounded by grey water and shifting Atlantic skies, an ancient stone tomb rests beneath a grassy mound older than the pyramids themselves. At first glance, Gavrinis doesn't seem enormous. No towering walls, no giant statues, just a low hill rising quietly above the island landscape. But hidden inside the mound is one of the most mysterious prehistoric chambers ever discovered in Europe. A narrow stone passage completely covered with strange carved symbols whose meanings disappeared thousands of years ago. And honestly, the deeper you move inside the tomb, the less the place feels like ordinary archaeology. It feels encoded. Gavrinis was built during the Neolithic period more than 5,000 years ago near the coast of modern-day France. That timeline changes everything immediately. The monument predates Stonehenge, predates the Great Pyramid of Giza. Yet ancient builders already possessed the organisation and engineering ability required to move enormous stone slabs and construct sophisticated ceremonial architecture on a small island surrounded by water. That alone feels astonishing emotionally. The structure itself is a passage tomb. A narrow stone corridor leads inward beneath the mound toward a central burial chamber hidden underground. But what makes Gavrinis extraordinary is not only the architecture, it's the carvings. Nearly every major stone lining the passage contains intricate symbols etched directly into the rock. Swirls, curves, axes, abstract geometric patterns, strange flowing lines covering the chamber walls from floor to ceiling, and nobody knows exactly what they mean. The carvings are among the most elaborate examples of prehistoric megalithic art ever discovered. Some researchers believe they represent spiritual symbolism, cosmology, or ceremonial knowledge connected to death and ritual. Others think they may preserve symbolic language systems or encoded cultural memory now permanently lost. Because unlike later civilizations, the builders left no written explanations behind. Only stone, only patterns, only silence. And honestly, the symbols feel unsettling precisely because they look intentional without being understandable. Humans react strongly to meaningful-looking signs we cannot decode. The carvings clearly mattered deeply to the people who created them. They repeated shapes carefully across multiple stones. Certain patterns aligned deliberately within the passage. This was not random decoration. The tomb was communicating something. Modern people simply no longer understand the language. The atmosphere inside Gavrinis intensifies the mystery even further. The corridor is enclosed and narrow. Light fades quickly behind you. The carved stones surround visitors completely while the ceiling lowers overhead, beneath the weight of the mound above. Ancient builders understood how confined underground spaces affect emotion long before psychology existed formally. The passage controls movement and perception deliberately. You descend slowly into darkness, while surrounded by symbols whose meanings vanished thousands of years ago. There's another fascinating detail too. Researchers later discovered that some carved stones at Gavrinis may originally have belonged to even older monuments before being reused in the tomb itself. Fragments of larger patterns continue across broken surfaces, suggesting ancient people dismantled earlier sacred structures and incorporated pieces into the passage chamber. That possibility changes the site completely. The tomb may already have been preserving fragments of a lost past even when it was first constructed. The island setting also matters enormously psychologically. Reaching Gavrinis requires crossing water before arriving at the isolated mound. That separation creates emotional distance from ordinary space immediately. Ancient ceremonial sites on islands often feel more sacred because water itself becomes a boundary between worlds. And honestly, Gavrinis carries exactly that atmosphere. Quiet, remote, disconnected from modern life. Naturally, myths surrounded the island over centuries. Hidden treasure beneath the mound, secret knowledge encoded in the carvings, ancient priests performing rituals inside the chamber beneath torchlight. Some local legends even describe the island as spiritually dangerous, after dark. Most of those stories belong more to folklore than archaeology. But honestly, prehistoric tombs filled with unreadable symbols almost automatically generate mythology. The construction itself remains astonishing. Massive stones had to be transported, shaped, and positioned with incredible precision long before metal tools or advanced machinery existed. The builders aligned the passage carefully beneath the mound while balancing enormous ceiling slabs overhead. This required engineering skill, planning, and collective labour far beyond what older generations once assumed prehistoric societies possessed. And maybe the most haunting part of Gavrinis is the realization that the symbols were probably never meant for us. The carvings belong to a world of meaning now mostly erased from human memory. The people who understood them disappeared thousands of years ago. Their beliefs vanished. Their language vanished. Yet the stone passage survived almost perfectly beneath the mound. Waiting. Silent. Still covered in messages nobody can fully read anymore. There's also something deeply intimate about the scale of the chamber. Unlike giant open-air monuments dominating landscapes, Gavrinis feels enclosed and hidden. The mystery exists underground, personal, almost secretive. The tomb was not built for distant admiration. It was built for controlled ritual experience inside darkness and stone. That difference changes everything emotionally. The pyramid, rising above the endless jungle. Deep in the forests of Guatemala, a giant stone pyramid rises above the jungle canopy, like the remains of another world. Trees stretch endlessly toward the horizon. Mist moves through the forest below, and above it all stands Temple 4 of Tikal, one of the tallest structures ever built by the ancient Maya civilization. For centuries, the jungle almost swallowed it completely. Then explorers climbed through the forest and discovered something astonishing, an entire lost city hidden beneath the trees. And honestly, Temple 4 still feels unreal the first time you see it emerging above the canopy, because it doesn't look abandoned. It looks buried alive. Tikal was once one of the most powerful cities in the Maya world, located deep inside what is now northern Guatemala. At its height, the city controlled trade routes, political alliances, warfare networks, and enormous populations spread across the surrounding rainforest. Massive temples, plazas, reservoirs, and ceremonial structures filled the landscape. This was not an isolated ruin. It was a living empire hidden inside the jungle. Temple 4 became one of the city's greatest monuments. Built during the reign of the Maya ruler Yikin Chankawil in the 8th century, the pyramid rises more than 60 meters above the ground. That height mattered enormously. The structure towered above both the city and the surrounding forest, making it one of the tallest ancient constructions in the Americas. And honestly, climbing it even today still feels overwhelming. The jungle spreads in every direction like an ocean of green beneath the sky. The pyramid itself was built as both ceremonial monument and royal statement of power. Steep stairways ascend toward the summit shrine where rituals and political symbolism once unfolded high above the city below. Ancient Maya architecture often connected elevation directly with sacred authority. The higher the structure, the closer rulers and priests symbolically moved toward divine space. Temple 4 embodied that idea perfectly, but over time the city declined. Population systems weakened. Political instability spread across the Maya world, and eventually, the jungle reclaimed enormous sections of Tikal completely. Trees grew through plazas, roots cracked stone stairways, entire buildings disappeared beneath vegetation for centuries. The rainforest slowly erased the city from view. That transformation changed the atmosphere of Tikal permanently. Unlike ruins standing exposed in open desert, jungle ruins feel hidden, alive. The forest surrounds every structure with sound and movement constantly. Birds echo through the canopy. Wind shifts through leaves high above broken temples. And honestly, the jungle makes the city feel unfinished archaeologically, like enormous portions still remain concealed beyond what anyone has fully uncovered. Temple 4 became especially famous because of what visitors experience at sunrise. Before dawn, people climb the pyramid in darkness while the jungle below remains covered in mist. Then slowly the tops of other distant temples emerge through the fog like islands rising from another world. The forest begins making sound again as animals awaken beneath the canopy, and for a few moments, the city almost feels alive the way it once did centuries ago. That experience changed how many archaeologists emotionally understood the Maya world itself. Researchers later discovered that Tikal was far larger than early explorers originally imagined. Using LIDAR technology capable of seeing beneath forest cover, archaeologists revealed hidden roads, defensive walls, residential zones, and massive urban infrastructure stretching far beyond visible ruins. The jungle had concealed an enormous civilization almost completely. Temple 4 was only the visible peak rising above it. Naturally, myths surrounded the city for generations, lost treasure chambers beneath the pyramids, secret tunnels connecting temples underground, ancient curses protecting royal tombs. Most of those stories belong more to legend than archaeology, but honestly Tikal already feels mythological without exaggeration. A giant city truly did disappear beneath the rainforest for centuries before modern rediscovery. The engineering behind Temple 4 also remains extraordinary. Ancient builders transported huge quantities of limestone through dense, jungle terrain without modern machinery. The pyramid required enormous labor organization, planning, and political power to complete. And because the Maya used no metal tools or large domesticated draft animals for construction, every stone represented direct human effort on an astonishing scale. There's another reason Temple 4 affects visitors so strongly psychologically. Height changes perception. The climb separates you gradually from the forest floor below until the jungle transforms into landscape instead of environment. Ancient rulers understood that effect deeply. Standing at the summit, you feel detached from ordinary space completely. The pyramid was designed to create emotional distance between sacred authority and the world beneath it, and maybe that's why Tikal continues haunting people today. Not because it contains impossible supernatural secrets, but because it proves how enormous civilizations can disappear almost entirely beneath nature over time. A city once filled with rulers, ceremonies, warfare, and thousands of lives slowly vanished beneath the rainforest, until only the tallest temple still broke through the canopy. The stone covered in symbols nobody could explain. For centuries, a massive stone beside a river in Massachusetts confused almost everyone who saw it, not because of its size, but because of the strange carvings covering its surface. Symbols, lines, shapes that looked deliberate but impossible to fully understand. And the longer people studied the rock, the more theories appeared. Ancient explorers, lost civilizations, secret messages carved long before modern America existed. The object became known as Dighton Rock, and honestly, even today, nobody agrees completely on who carved it or what the markings were truly meant to say. Dighton Rock sits near the Taunton River in Massachusetts and has fascinated historians, archaeologists, and mystery researchers for hundreds of years. The boulder itself is large, smooth, and partially covered with carved symbols worn down by weather and water over time. Some markings resemble geometric shapes, others appear almost like letters or figures. But erosion damaged many details long ago, making interpretation extremely difficult. And that uncertainty became the centre of the mystery. The carvings were already known to local indigenous communities long before European settlers began studying the rock. But once colonists saw the symbols, speculation exploded immediately. People started trying to connect the markings to nearly every ancient civilization imaginable. Phoenicians, Vikings, Portuguese explorers, even lost civilizations from mythology. Because humans react strongly to mysterious writing-like symbols we cannot easily explain, especially when they appear in unexpected places. One of the biggest problems surrounding Dighton Rock is visibility itself. The carvings became heavily eroded over centuries from river exposure, changing water levels, and environmental damage. Different observers describe different symbols depending on lighting, weather, and imagination. Some claim they saw ships, others saw human figures or letters. The rock became almost psychological. People often interpreted the markings according to what they already expected to find. And honestly, that happens constantly with ancient symbols. Human brains are incredibly good at finding familiar patterns inside incomplete information, especially on weathered surfaces. A curved line becomes a letter, a crack becomes intentional design. Once expectation enters the process, interpretation becomes extremely subjective. Dighton Rock became one of the most famous examples of that phenomenon in American history. Researchers today generally believe many of the carvings were most likely created by indigenous peoples connected to Algonquian-speaking cultures in the region. Some symbols may represent traditional markings, territorial signs, or ceremonial imagery rather than lost Old World writing systems. That explanation fits much of the historical and cultural evidence far better than exotic theories about ancient transoceanic civilizations carving secret messages into river stones. But the mystery survived anyway, because emotionally, Dighton Rock feels older than explanation. The markings are fragmented enough to remain ambiguous, and ambiguity keeps mystery alive longer than certainty ever could. The rock exists in a perfect space between archaeology and imagination. There's another reason the stone became so famous historically. During the 18th and 19th centuries, people desperately wanted evidence proving ancient outsiders reached the Americas long before Columbus, so every unusual artifact or symbol became potential proof for lost expeditions and forgotten civilizations. Dighton Rock entered that cultural obsession at exactly the right time, and once mystery narratives formed around it, they never fully disappeared again. The river setting also changes the atmosphere enormously. For centuries, the rock sat partially exposed near the water, where tides and shifting light constantly altered how the carvings appeared. Morning sunlight revealed certain lines. Shadows hid others. Rain changed the texture completely. The environment itself made the symbols feel unstable and alive. And honestly, ancient carved stones beside moving water almost automatically feel ritualistic emotionally. Some interpretations became incredibly elaborate over time. One theory claimed Portuguese explorer Miguel Cotarreal carved the rock after reaching North America, before disappearing historically. Others insisted Vikings left the markings during early exploration attempts. A few even connected the symbols to the lost continent of Atlantis. Most of those ideas have little strong archaeological support, but they survived because the rock never offered a single clear answer to replace them completely. There's also something deeply human about the mystery itself. People cannot tolerate unreadable symbols easily. We instinctively believe meaning must exist behind them. So when markings survive without obvious explanation, humans begin building stories automatically to fill the silence. Dighton Rock became less about the carvings themselves, and more about what different generations wanted the carvings to mean. Over time, preservation efforts moved the stone into a protected museum environment to prevent further erosion. That decision likely saved what remained of the carvings from disappearing completely. But it also changed the experience emotionally. Originally, the rock existed outdoors beside the river where nature and weather shape perception constantly. Now, the mystery survives mostly through study, interpretation and debate rather than raw landscape atmosphere. Still, archaeologists continue examining the markings carefully, because even if the carvings belong primarily to indigenous traditions, they remain historically important. The rock preserves fragments of cultural expression and contact with the landscape long before modern America fully formed. And honestly, that reality is already fascinating enough without needing lost civilizations attached to it. Maybe that's why Dighton Rock continues haunting people today, not because it proves impossible ancient visitors crossed the ocean secretly, but because it reminds us how fragile meaning becomes across time. A message carved into stone survived for centuries. The stone remained, the symbols remained, but the certainty behind them slowly faded until interpretation itself became the mystery. The desert ruins left behind by a vanished civilization. In the middle of the Arizona desert, a massive ancient structure still rises above the dry earth beneath the burning sun. Thick walls made from earth and clay stand against the landscape like the remains of a forgotten fortress abandoned centuries ago. No one knows its original name, no written records from its builders survive, and by the time European explorers reached the region, the civilization that created it had already disappeared. The ruins became known as Casa Grande, the Great House, and honestly the structure still feels mysterious the moment you see it standing alone in the desert. Because it doesn't look temporary, it looks like something built to last forever. Casa Grande was constructed by the ancestral Sonoran desert people, often connected to the Hohokam culture, a civilization that flourished across parts of what is now Arizona for centuries before eventually declining and dispersing. The region was harsh, dry, and difficult to survive in. Yet ancient communities here engineered extensive irrigation canal systems capable of carrying water across enormous distances through the desert. That achievement alone shocked archaeologists once the scale became fully understood. These were not isolated villages barely surviving. They were organized societies reshaping the environment itself. The Great House stands several stories tall and was built primarily from caliche, a hardened desert material made from clay, sand, and calcium carbonate. Ancient builders layered and shaped the material into thick, durable walls strong enough to survive centuries of heat, storms, and erosion. And honestly, the structure looks strangely modern emotionally. Angular, geometric, deliberate. The building still dominates the flat desert landscape around it, even after hundreds of years of decay. Researchers believe Casa Grande likely served ceremonial, political, astronomical, or administrative purposes connected to the surrounding settlement network. Its elevated design allowed visibility across the region, while certain openings may align with solar or lunar events during specific times of year. That possibility fascinated archaeologists enormously, because once again, ancient builders appeared deeply connected to astronomy and seasonal observation long before modern science existed formally. The surrounding settlement once contained homes, courtyards, walls, and large community areas extending beyond the central structure itself. People farmed here, worked here, raised families here beneath the harsh desert sun, and because irrigation systems supported agriculture across difficult terrain, large populations became possible in environments many modern people still underestimate completely. But eventually something changed. The canal systems declined, communities dispersed, and by the time outsiders later encountered the ruins, the original civilization had already vanished from the region. Researchers still debate exactly why. Drought, flooding, resource strain, political instability, environmental pressure. The answer may involve multiple causes unfolding gradually over generations. And honestly, gradual disappearance always feels heavier than sudden collapse. Because Casa Grande doesn't look destroyed, it looks left behind. The walls remained standing while the people slowly disappeared around them. That atmosphere gives the site unusual emotional weight. The structure feels paused instead of ruined. Naturally, myths developed around the Great House over centuries. Hidden chambers buried beneath the desert. Lost treasure sealed inside the walls. Ancient observatories connected to forgotten knowledge. Some stories even claim the structure was built by giants, because later generations struggled to imagine how ancient desert civilizations constructed something so large. Most of those legends belong more to folklore than archaeology. But honestly, isolated monuments in empty landscapes almost automatically generate mystery. The desert environment intensifies everything too. Heat distorts the horizon, wind moves across open land without interruption. The ruins stand exposed beneath enormous sky, with almost no natural cover surrounding them. And because the building rises above otherwise flat terrain, it becomes visible from far away like a marker left behind in the desert. Ancient builders certainly understood that visual power intentionally. There's another fascinating detail about Casa Grande. The irrigation canals built by the Hohokam were among the most sophisticated ancient water systems in North America. Some stretched for miles across desert terrain with carefully engineered gradients controlling water flow precisely. Modern canal systems in parts of Arizona still follow routes originally developed by these ancient communities. That continuity feels astonishing emotionally. Ancient engineering still shaping the modern landscape centuries later. Researchers continue studying the surrounding region because large portions of Hohokam settlements remain buried beneath desert soil even today. Additional structures, canal systems, and ceremonial spaces likely still exist underground, waiting to be uncovered. That possibility changes how empty the desert feels once you understand how much history remains hidden beneath it. And maybe that's why Casa Grande continues haunting visitors today. Not because it contains impossible secrets, but because it preserves the remains of a civilization advanced enough to master desert survival, engineer massive water systems, and construct monumental architecture long before modern America existed. Then slowly that world disappeared. The people vanished. The canals dried, but the great house remained standing beneath the desert sky.